Our topic for this video pertains to activity-based costing. Let us define activity-based costing. It is a method of assigning costs to products based on the activities they require. It results to more accurate data on product costs because in here, we consider multiple cost driver and identify the rate needed in order to assign cost to our product. And also, it identifies the causal relationship between the incurrence of costs and the activity that causes that cost. Let us compare traditional costing with activity-based costing. In traditional costing, as we have discussed in job order costing, we only identify a single predetermined overhead rate. While in activity-based costing, because we assign cost to our product using different cost drivers, of course, we will arrive at multiple number of overhead rates depending on the activity that the company takes. What are the important terms that we need to know? Number one, cost drivers. These are the activity that causes the cost. Number two, cost object. These are the product or department for which costs are accumulated or measured. Then we have the cost pool. These are group of cost object with similar cost driver. If we will have an illustration, we can compare it to a bus. We have one driver that will lead us to our destination. Then we have the passengers. The passengers are your cost object because all of them have the same cost driver. And the bus, which gives us a ride going to our destination, is our cost pool. What are examples of cost pools and cost drivers? For the production department, our example of activity cost drivers are the number of units, the number of setups, and the number of electricity units consumed. As compared to traditional costing, isn't it we have discussed that we only use one overhead rate, and the basis of our overhead rate is the labor hours or machine hours. In here, we cannot quantify that all of our costs are measured using labor hours or machine hours. So for example, we have rent. Rent cannot be measured using labor hours. So we need to have an activity that drives our rental cost, which is the square meters used or consumed by the company for that specific department or unit. Next is we have marketing. So in marketing, we use the number of sales personnel and the number of sales orders as our cost drivers. Then we have the research and development, the customer service, purchasing, and the material handling department, to name a few. Now, how do we identify and classify activities? There are 4 levels of activities. First is we have the unit level activity. Resources are acquired and activities performed for individual units of product. Next is we have the batch level activities. Resources are acquired and activities performed for a group or batch of similar products or services. Like for example, if you bake cookies, it is by batch or by group. So the consumption of the electricity for the oven is charged per batch that you use. Next, we have the product level activity. Resources are acquired and activities performed to produce and sell a specific product or service. For example, in a certain company, if it produces multiple products, each product has a designated activity. And lastly, we have the facility level activities wherein resources acquired and activities performed to provide general capacity to produce goods or services. So regardless of the product, these are being incurred for the whole factory. As our example, unit level, we have prime costs. For the batch level, we have the equipment setups, the product order processing, and the packing and shipping. Because when we deliver the goods to our customers or when we process the orders being sent to us, it is per batch. Next, we have product level. We have the designing, changing, and advertising. And for facility level, we have our heat, light, and security, insurance, and plant supervision. Now, what are the steps in implementing activity-based costing? Step 1, you should identify your cost pool, which is the group of cost object. Step 2, you identify the cost driver that causes the cost of your cost pool. Step 3, assign the cost to products. And step 4, calculate the cost application rates. What are the advantages and disadvantages of activity-based costing? The advantages are, number 1, more accurate overhead cost allocation. It is more representative of what the company do for each product that it manufactures. Number 2, more effective overhead cost control because we know the different activities that drives the cost, then we can control more effectively what leads to that cost. Number 3, focus on relevant factors because we can screen out information that are not related in our production. And number 4, better management of activities. Remember, there is no perfect process in any manufacturing industry. So what are the disadvantages? Number 1, cost to implement and maintain. When you implement activity-based costing, it requires time and effort and cost in order for you to implement it properly. And sometimes, when you implement the costing system, the information is not anymore relevant. So you need to balance the relevance and reliability of your system. And number 2, there is uncertainty with decision that still remains. As an example, we have this company. No company incurs 800,000 in manufacturing overhead costs. The company has been allocating overhead costs to individual product lines based on direct labor hours. Cost driver, we have direct labor hours, number of batches, number of shipments. We have the total overhead cost of 800,000. Each activity and cost pool is presented on screen. Two products have the following characteristics: product CPA and product ACO. It uses direct labor hours, number of batches, and number of shipments. Required, determine the overhead cost to be allocated to each product using traditional costing and activity-based costing. We will first compute our traditional costing. We only use one overhead rate, and that is direct labor hours for our total overhead cost of 800,000. So we need to compute our overhead rate, 800,000 divided by the amount of activity related to direct labor hours, which is 40,000. So our overhead rate would be 20 peso per hour. As you can see, we have product CPA and product ACO. Product CPA uses 2,000 labor hours, while product ACO uses 1,000 labor hours. So in order for us to arrive at the overhead cost allocated to product CPA, we multiply 2,000 hours by the 20 peso overhead rate. So we have 40,000 pesos for product CPA. While for product ACO, 1,000 times 20 peso per hour. So we have 20,000 pesos. Now for activity-based costing, we need to compute the overhead rate per cost driver. So the 800,000 total overhead cost is broken down into 300,000 direct labor hours, 300,000 number of batches, and 200,000 number of shipments. We need to divide the cost pool to our amount of activity. So in here, our direct labor hours is 300,000 divided by 40,000. So we have 7.5 as our overhead rate. For the number of batches, that's 300,000 divided by 1,000. We have 300 peso. And for the number of shipments, we have 200,000 divided by 500. So we have 400 peso. And then we multiply the specific overhead rates per cost driver to the amount of activity per product. So for example, product CPA uses 2,000 direct labor hours. We multiply it by 7.5. So the answer would be 15,000. Now for the number of batches, it uses 20 batches multiplied by 300. So we have 6,000. For the number of shipments, it uses 2 shipments multiplied by 400. So we have 800. So the total cost allocated to product CPA is 21,800. For product ACO, we multiply 1,000 direct labor hours with 7.5, we arrive at 7,500. Number of batches, 100. Multiply by 300, we arrive at 30,000. And for number of shipments, 150 multiplied by 400, we arrive at 60,000. And get the total, we get 97,500 costs allocated to product ACO.